Yo, 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 yo. Okay, there we go. We got it. Um, all right, y'all. I want to say first and foremost, call halal Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai. That's our praise to the Most High God. Name is only begotten Son of the world, ignorantly called Jesus Christ. And we're gonna be jumping into it today. Well, matter of fact, before we jump into it, let me plug all my stuff I got going, man. Follow us on Facebook, IG, Spotify. Uh, what else? TikTok. I'm also putting some more clips that aren't on YouTube yet, that'll soon to be on YouTube, on Facebook. I already got one going with Captain Tazamad down here from last week. And what else we got going? Nothing much. Nothing much, man. So with that, I know y'all can see the title. We're going to be going into Zechariah, the 5th chapter. We're going to be breaking it down because there's a lot of madness going on with that chapter from Christians, really. But we're going to be breaking it down. So let's go. Let's start from the top. Let me get this out of the way. Don't like this being over here at all. All right. Okay. See my camera doing that thing again. Let me see. No, we good. All right. Yeah, let's start at Zechariah chapter 5, verse 5. It says, Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is the resemblance throughout all the earth. So what we see right here is the Lord showing through his angels, right? Showing Zechariah this ephah. This ephah is a measuring receptacle that we used to use in the ancient days. So let's look at that real quick to prove what I'm talking about. This ephah. It says a receptacle for measuring and holding an amount. Basically, we used to use to measure specific amounts. You see examples of that. Exodus 16, 36, 10th part of an ephah, 10th part of an ephah, 10th part of ephah, just ephah. We use it for measuring things, or measurement receptacle. That's what it's used for. So this whole prophecy going down from Zechariah chapter 5, verse 5, all the way down to verse 11. Yeah, 11 is going to be talking about this ephah. And this ephah is going to have, I'm just going to just say it and we're going to prove it, right? This ephah represents Israel. Israel is the woman inside the ephah. Israel's wickedness has been thrown inside of it, and the lead weights on top of it. So it's going to represent us being in captivity ultimately until the elect get saved from Babylon the Great, which we see happening shortly, actually. So after giving that synopsis, we're going to go ahead and run straight through it. Oh, no, I'm going to get one more point. When you look at verse 6, let's read it in another translation. Because it says, this is their resemblance throughout the earth. This will prove what I'm saying. Israel, this is the basket. This is their resemblance. Basket and their resemblance throughout the earth. Which one do I want to use? I can use NIV. I read multiple ones. And I asked, what is it? He replied, it is a basket. It's a basket representation of the ephah, the measurement receptacle. And he added, this is the iniquity of the people throughout the land. So what he's saying is this is going to be this measuring receptacle, this ephah filled with the woman and the iniquities that are on it, and the what is it? The lead weight is supposed to symbolize Israel, the people of Israel. You see it with these translations. That's why it says in the KJV, it says this is their resemblance throughout all the earth. So to let you know what this is talking about. So let's go to verse 7. Right? They're going to be breaking this down verse for verse, having precepts. A lot of these got a lot of precepts. Some of these you got a few. So let's start at Zechariah chapter 5, verse 7. It says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. So, like I said before, this woman right here is Israel. We see throughout lots of scriptures Israel being referenced to a virgin, literally a woman, a wife, all these things throughout scripture. We're going to get a few of them, and then we're going to go into what the lead is and the wickedness and all that. So let's show with precepts who this woman is. Let's go to Second Ezra, I believe it's at 10:44. Second Ezra 10, verse 44. It says, this woman whom thou seest is Zion, and whereas she said unto thee, even she whom thou seest as a city builded. So this is the woman, and it's the same thing with Ezra. This is the woman that we see in Zechariah chapter 5, verse 7. It's Israel. Israel is this woman in the midst of this measuring receptacle called an ephah. Let's get some more precepts to back that up. Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 2. Jeremiah 6, verse 2, and it says, I have likened the daughter of Zion unto a comely and delicate woman. We see again, Israel is that woman. Israel is a similitude or simile to the woman in Zechariah chapter 5. So let's get one more, and we're going to keep it pushing. This is Jeremiah 31, verse 31. It says, behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, both kingdoms. It says, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers and the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, both houses, all of Israel. Because this woman that you see in Zechariah chapter 5, it's not just Judah, right? It's all of Israel, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them. So the Lord is a husband unto Israel, all of us. He's a husband unto all of us. So what does that make us? The wife. What gender is the wife? The woman. So this is the woman which we see inside of this ephah with the lead weight on top of it. So let's go to back to verse 7 and read into verse 8. It says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. We already proved who that woman is. We're going to deal with the lead in verse 8. Really verse 8 and verse 9. So verse 8. It says, and he said, this is wickedness, and he cast it in the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. So the mouth is like the top, where just like how you have a cup, right? This cup, this would be the mouth. So on top. So Israel would be inside of this cup. Wickedness would be thrown in, lead weight on top. That's what we see right now. So let's go into all this. Let's go into this wickedness. You see Christ, when he's getting on the Pharisees, the scribes and the Pharisees, quoting Zechariah chapter 5. So let's go to Matthew chapter 23, verse 32, when he's getting on the Pharisees. It says, fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. What do you use to measure things in the ancient world? An ephah. It says, fill ye up the measure of your fathers, ye serpents and generations of vipers. How can ye escape the damnation of hell? That's going into death, being condemned unto death. What makes you condemned unto death? Sins, transgressions, breaking the statutes, killing the prophets, which is really what this is going into. That us doing that basically us doing that basically condemned us to die, because the prophets, which I'm gonna get later in this lesson, the prophets oriented us back unto the Father, pointed us back unto the Father, told us to stop transgressing the laws of God so that he can forgive us, so we can move on and continue to live in the land. We said, no, screw that. We're going to be wicked, walk past the prophets, kill the prophets. Now we're going into slavery. And this is all of that together is a culmination of Israel being that woman in that ephah and that lead weight on top. Because what is that lead weight? The curses and the captivity. And we're going to prove all that with the precepts. So let's go to verse 30 to see who Christ is talking about right here when he's talking about filling up the measure of your fathers. So I'm going to start at verse 29. It says, Matthew 23, verse 29, it says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because ye build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous." Because the scribes and the Pharisees, Sadducees, elders of Israel, they're all the leaders, the leadership of Israel. They're the leadership of Israel, and wherever they point to and whatever and however they act, Israel is going to act. So they're hyping up the prophets and doing all this stuff, but they are the same people who would have killed the prophets because they were the sinners of that time period. And they're the sinners of this time period that Christ is talking about. That's why he says in verse 2, Matthew 23, verse 2, it says, "The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat," right? Because they dispensed the law. Verse 3, all therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. So Christ is telling people to listen to the Pharisees when it's in reference to the laws. That's why I said sit in Moses' seat, reference to the laws. "But do ye not after their works, for they say and do not." You see that? They say and do not. So you had elders of this time period, which Christ was going up against, namely the scribes, the specific scribes and Pharisees and elders of Israel. They were leading the people and they were leading them to destruction. Even though they were hyping up the law, even though they were hyping up the prophets, they were still being sinners. They were telling people to keep the laws, but they weren't keeping it themselves. And what happens with our people is we see our leaders doing that, we start acting like that. So let's get some precepts, then we're going to jump back to this. All right. Isaiah 9 and 16. It says, "For the leaders of this people cause them to err, and they that are led of them are destroyed." And that's what that's been happening since the time of Isaiah. That's the time that's been happening to us since the time of Christ, the time when we was in West Africa and in America. The leaders of our people have been causing us to err by not walking after these commandments, like how they say, or trying to show a way of righteousness and walking contrary to it. So if we see our people, if we see our leaders doing that, what are we going to do? The same thing. And if they're going to be destroyed for their wicked actions, so will we if we follow after them. That's why it says, "For the leaders of my people cause them to err, and they that are led of them are destroyed." And what is that? What is it showing you? They're throwing that wickedness into that ephah with that woman. We're continuing to pile on that wickedness into that ephah, and then eventually, what you see throughout the prophets and throughout Christ's time period, and now that lead weight is thrown on top of us, which is what? The curses, captivity, destruction, death, like it says, the damnation of hell. So let's look at this. Christ said, measure ye up the measure of your fathers. What did your forefathers do? Were sinners just like you. So let's get Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 26. It says, "Nevertheless, they were disobedient and rebelled against thee and cast thy law." Because the problem that Christ had with the Pharisees, Sadducees, elders of Israel, scribes, all of them, is a great deal of them were sinners. And that's the problem he had. He wasn't getting on them, because they're Pharisees, because they're scribes and all that. Because that's what the Christians, and honestly, a lot of Christianized Hebrew Israelites like to say. He's just getting on them because they're Pharisees. No, he was getting on them for being transgressors of the law. That's why Christ was getting on them in Matthew 7, how y'all put, not Matthew, Mark chapter 7, when he said what was that? You transgressing the law of God. You full well transgress the laws of God through your traditions that you make. That's what Christ was getting on them for. So let's go into this. Nehemiah 9, verse 26. Nevertheless, they were disobedient and rebelled against thee, and cast thy law behind their backs, and slew thy prophets, which testified against them, to turn them unto thee. So the prophets were set up to turn us back into the Father. They were the mouthpiece of the Father. He's not about to get up off his throne and tell and talk to us like that's not how he works. And that's the thing with our people. Because look at this. This wasn't even a part of my lesson, but I'm gonna pull it anyway. Amos 3 verse 7. It says, "Surely Yahweh power will do nothing, but he will reveal his secret unto his servants the prophets." So Yahweh is not about to do anything. He's about to sit on his throne, send his word out through the prophets that he selected to bring his people back unto him. That's why it says, "And slew thy prophets which testified against them," that they tell them, y'all are being sinners, to turn them back to thee, back to the Father. That's what they did. That's them measuring up the measure of their fathers. Their father, the Pharisees were the people who the Pharisees would have been these same Israelites killing the prophets because they're transgressors. That's why they came up against Christ like how they are, because Christ was a prophet. So it says, "And slew thy prophets which testified against them to turn them to thee, and they wrought great provocations, evils, and blasphemies. Therefore thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies." And that's that lead weight. That's that lead weight. We are the woman in the ephah. Our wickedness is piling up, and then at the mouth of it, the top of the lip of it is what? The curses, captivity. Therefore thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies, who vexed them, and in the time of their trouble, when they cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and according to thy manifold mercies thou gavest them saviors, which cuts the whole. How people say, Isaiah says there's no savior but me, but it says the Lord gave us saviors. That cuts that, but that's irrelevant. And it says, who saved them out of the hand of their enemies. But the point I want to pull out of here is that the prophets always oriented us or pointed us, right? Like orientation means like a point, like who you're pointing at, pointed us back unto the Father, to line us up back to what he was, because basically to get us back on, basically to reconcile us like how Christ was supposed to. So the prophets were set up to do that, but we slew them. And we did all those things. We did all those. Now we go back to Matthew chapter 23. And we did all those things. And we're piling up stuff through that, and through the wickedness we were already doing, and that slewing the prophets, we're piling up that wickedness inside that ephah. Till the Lord had to put us into captivity, had to put that talent of talent of lead on top of us. And we're going to get into all of that. We're going to touch every part of that. So let's go back into this. Verse 30. No, I'm going to start at verse 29. It's, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because ye build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would have not been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets." Yes, you would have, because you guys are transgressors. These specific Pharisees that he's talking about. It says, verse 31, Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Right? And look at the next part. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. You're filling it up just like how y'all did back in the day. Y'all would have been them same Israelites, because y'all are sinners. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, and hold up. Let me get this again. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? That damnation of hell is that lead talent. Because we see hell. We're going to come back to this. Jonah 2. We see hell is either representing death or a bad position. And I'll show you this. This is Jonah. Let's start at Jonah 2 and 1. It says, Then Jonah prayed unto Yahweh his power out of the fish's belly, and said, I cried by the reason of mine affliction unto Yahweh, and he heard me out of the belly of hell. Now Jonah was in literally the belly of the fish. He wasn't underground. He wasn't in some burning place with a red dude with a pitchfork. He was in a terrible condition. It's going into his affliction. And what is our affliction of Israelites through transgression of the laws of God? That wickedness inside of an ephah? Captivity, destruction, death. That's why Christ is literally quoting this. Because these are the people quoting Zechariah chapter 5 in a way, in a roundabout way, because y'all are the people leading people into destruction. These scribes and Pharisees. Y'all are the people allowing that y'all are the people contributing and allowing Israelites to fill up that effort. And once it's finally full up and that lead talent is put on it, y'all can't escape that. Hell, they couldn't even escape it in that time period because they were being oppressed and afflicted by the Romans. It says, wherefore, behold, I send unto you the prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall ye scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. The same thing they did to Christ. Verse 35, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechias, which is the same prophecy that he's roundabout quoting in Matthew chapter 23, which goes back to Zechariah chapter 5. And it says, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. They killed Zechariah. So we see this ephah, we see this wickedness, we see all this matter of fact, no, before we even go into that, let me get one more. Psalms chapter 38, verse 4. Okay, this is Psalms 38, verse 4. It's for mine iniquities have gone over my head, just like how the woman's inside the ephah with the wickedness, with the lead on top of it, which is going into our curse and our captivity. It says, for mine iniquities are gone over mine head as a heavy burden. They are too heavy for me. They're too heavy for him. And just like how Yahushua said, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Because you can't. You'd have filled up this ephah. Now this lead has to be thrown on top. Now that you have to go through these curses, these afflictions, and all of this death. So going back into Zephaniah chapter 5, verse 7 and verse 8, right? It says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. We've already proven that that's Israel. And that talent of lead is our captivity and our curses. It says, and he said, this is wickedness, and it is cast into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight, right? Because just like how David said, my iniquities are too much for me to bear, they're above my head. It said the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof. That's our captivities. That's those curses that came upon us for the sins that we did. Deuteronomy 28. I mean, this just screams out, honestly, it's just Deuteronomy 28. That's what that lead is. Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Let's go to verse 45. It says, moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee. What does it mean to overtake something? To overpower, to move past. That's something we can't lift off of us. That you're being overtaken. You've been overpowered. Just like when you were the woman inside that ephah, you want to get out, but that lead weight is stuck on top of you, which is the curses. Till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of Yahweh thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he command thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. Why? Because they're stuck on top of us. They've overtaken us. So let's go back to Zechariah, the 5th chapter. Right. It's like I'm going too fast. I feel like I'm going too fast. How far am I in this? I'm 27 minutes. All right. I'm going pretty fast. I done filled up this whole page. All right. Zechariah 5, verse 9. It says, Then lifted I up mine eyes, and looked, and beheld, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Earth being the ground, heaven being the skies. These are one of these instances where heaven literally just means the skies, because heavens, like I think as Shemayim goes into, I mean, it's a word that gets translated into heaven or heavens, which could either be the skies, second definition, rulership, because you're above everybody, and the third one would be the third heaven. In this context, would be the skies. So it would be something that's visible. The ephah, the woman inside of it, the wickedness, the lead, which would be the curses, would be seen before everybody. Everybody would see it. So going back through this, it says, then lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came two women. We're going to get into what these two women are through the precepts and prove what they are. And I'll go ahead and say it right now. It represents the Europeans. It also represents the so-called Jewish man as well. All of them combined are these two women, these two Gentile nations, right, that had the power of the wings of a stork. What is a stork? A stork is a predatory animal known for snatching children. Now, in the mythos, or like the mythology of nowadays, the stork delivers children. But if you go back before that, a stork was known to be a predatory animal that's known for stealing children. You see how they just turn everything upside down, like how it says in Isaiah, I think that's 29, right? But they have the power to steal children. Now, that should already basically ring something in your mind to let you know that this is talking about captivity. Because we see with the precepts that we added from Zechariah chapter 5 and 5 through 8, it talks about us going into captivity and being destroyed for killing the prophets and stacking up and racking up sins and going into that damnation of hell, which is being condemned unto captivity, condemned unto transgressions. And we're going to go through every part of these, every point of this, to prove what I just said, and to prove what these wings of the stork here, what wings of the stork are, these two women, and showing what the ephah. Well, I mean, the ephah between earth and heaven literally just means being able to be seen before everybody. Because if it's up in the sky, it's just up there and you can just see it. Just like how the golden arch is up there and you just see it when you drive past it. That's how our captivity is. How it's known throughout the entirety of the world through the conquest and destruction of the Europeans taking the Black, Spanish, Native Americans into captivity. God's true chosen people of God. So let's get these precepts. Let's prove how our captivity is being seen throughout the whole world. I'm going to give Baruch chapter 2 in the GNT. This is Baruch 2 in the GNT. It says, so Yahweh carried out the threat. So Yahweh carried out the threat. I'm used to reading this in the King James. The threat he made against us and against our judges, our kings, our rulers, and the people of Israel and Judah. Nowhere else on earth have such things happened as happened in Jerusalem when Yahweh carried out the threats written in the law of Moses. What is that? Deuteronomy chapter 28. So Yahweh made good on this, because you read this in King James version. He says Yahweh made good on his word. He said he was going to bring all these curses that lead weight upon us, all these curses for all the wickedness we threw inside of that ephah. And these curses are so destructive and so hellacious, like and so condemning that it's so destructive that it's shown to be like the most terrible thing that ever happened to a people. And you can see that with the Black, Spanish, Native Americans through our captivity. You go to Japan, they know about it. You go to India, they know about it. You go to freaking Asia, they know about it. They all know about what's happened to the Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And everything that's happened is basically the threats that was written in the law of Moses. So that's how our captivity right? That wickedness and that lead weight set on top of us, that ephah being lifted up between earth and heaven, is showing you how our captivity has been seen by the whole world. Everybody knows about it. It's crazy because it's a testament. Them knowing about our captivity is a testament to how crazy it's been, because they don't know everything about American history. Like the curriculums that are in these other countries, they don't know everything about American history, but they do know about the captivity that happened to the Black, Spanish, Native Americans. Why? Because it was so evil. It was such death, so much captivity, so much evil things happening to a people. It had to be broadcast throughout the whole world. That's why it says this, between earth and heaven. So let's go into proving who the two women are. Let's look at the curses again. Deuteronomy 28, where did I write down? And 49. It says, it's Deuteronomy 28, verse 49, one of the curses. It says, for Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far. I don't know why I'm saying afar. I always read it like that. I'm going to read it right. It's like it. Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Right? And I was gonna stop right here, but I want to read the rest of this, because this is going to support the point that I made previously about how our captivity was so gruesome that everybody knows about it. Verse 50, it says, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. You see bro, they have pictures of 3 or 4 year olds. I'm not sure if it's 2-year-olds or not, but I know it's 3 or 4 year olds picking cotton, having their backs whipped, all these things happening. And the same thing for the old men and women. It says, and he shall eat the fruit of thine cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed. And we've seen that happening with Israel, the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes that came across here, like it talks about in 2nd Ezra. Came across the Euphrates and came to the Americas. We see them being starved out. We see the buffalo being killed. We've seen them destroying their food sources. All these things happening to them. Is that he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until I be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep until he have destroyed thee. And we see it also happening with the northern kingdom throughout history, with the Hispanics and the Native Americans. But back to this again, it says Yahweh shall, verse 49 again, it says Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle fly, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Now we see through the transatlantic slave trade, all these countries, if you look at their flags and their emblems and their signets, all have what? The eagle, which is a predatory bird, just like the stork. The same thing. The Europeans did this. We can take, let's just negate everything I've just said, every other verse in the Bible outside of verse 49. Because it says, Lord shall bring a nation from far on one end of the earth unto the other to come bring you into captivity. We see that happening through the transatlantic slave trade with the English, the Spanish, and the French, and the Portuguese. All of them, right? These European nations coming and taking us into captivity. We see this happening, and they're being likened unto a predatory bird, just like the stork in Zechariah chapter 5. So let's get another one. Hosea chapter 8, verse 1, Salakia. It says, set thy trumpet to thy mouth, basically sound the alarm. He shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord. And who did that? The Europeans through the transatlantic slave trade. Because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. And what is that? The wickedness that is inside the ephah. Since they build up the wickedness inside of the ephah, right? the Lord is going to send that lead weight, which is that those captors, to come put us into captivity. And who did that? The Europeans, who are also likened unto an eagle in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Hosea chapter 1. Let's jump to verse 8 to show how this is tied in with Zechariah chapter 5. Israel is swallowed up through them coming up against the house of the Lord, coming up against the Israelites for transgressing the laws of God. Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. What is an ephah? An ephah is a vessel. An ephah is a receptacle for measurement. They're swallowed up like a vessel with no pleasure. There shall be as no pleasure in a land that isn't theirs, from the Gentiles. So we see these two women who are gathering up Judah and Israel are Gentiles who are as a similitude of an eagle. Who put Judah and Jerusalem into captivity? Who came from afar to do that? These European nations, namely the English, French, Spanish, and the rest of those who took part of the transatlantic slave trade. So let's go back to Zechariah chapter 5. These two women, it says, and I'm gonna read it again, Zechariah chapter 5, verse 9. Then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women. These two women are a representation of the European nations who brought us into captivity, right? And we're going to delve off a little bit deeper into who they are. But right now, we know this represents Gentile nations who put us into captivity. And the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. What? A predatory bird, predatory animal, like the hawk and like the eagle. What nationality represents that? Well, let's just say it like this. What nationality of people have an eagle as their signet? The European nations, even America. So let's go back to Matthew. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse, what is this? 24 and 28. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 28. It says, it's Christ speaking, it said, for wheresoever the carcass is a dead body or dead animal. For whatsoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Why? To prey on that. So let's see what Christ is talking about about this carcass, because the carcass is what? A dead animal or a dead person. So let's look at this. I got a lot of writing. Let's get Revelation 11, verse 8. It says, Revelation 11, verse 8, it says, and their dead bodies, their carcasses, and their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of the great city, which is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord, our Other One, was crucified. And that's not talking, that when it's saying about our Lord being crucified, I don't want to talk about Christ being crucified. We make up the body of Christ, the body which he died for. So when we are destroyed and being made to be put to death, Christ is being crucified because we make up that body. But it says their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of this great city. And this great city is Babylon the Great. Who's ruling Babylon the Great? The Europeans. The same people whose emblem is the eagle. Let's get another one. Proverbs 21, verse 16. It says, the man that wandereth out of the way of understanding, just like how we did when we transgressed the laws of God and built up that wickedness in the ephah. The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead. So we are like dead men walking when we transgress the laws of God. Our people are being persecuted. Why? Matter of fact, let's just say it like this, right? The other nations are allowed to persecute us and to rule over us when we transgress the laws of God. Why? Because we're dead men walking. We're alive. We're made alive through these commandments. That's why it says those who keep the commandments shall live in them. But when we transgress from them, we reap up the wages of death. We become those dead carcasses where the eagles are gathered to rule over us and to oppress us and to take a spoil from us. So let's go back to Matthew chapter 24. It says, for wheresoever the carcass is, Slakia, there will the eagles be gathered also. So where we are transgressing the laws of God at, the other nations will be allowed, namely the European nations, will be allowed to rule over us and to take a spoil from us. So let's get Jeremiah chapter 24. Verse 9. 24:9. Oh, I need to get Deuteronomy. Slack it. 29, verse 22. Okay. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 22. So that the generation to come of your children that shall rise up after you, and the stranger that shall come from a far land shall say, when they see the plagues of that land, the plagues, right? Because we're dead men walking. We are those going under the being subjected unto the curses through transgressions, which is going to say in a minute, is to see the plagues of that land and the sicknesses which Yahweh have laid upon it, and that the whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that is not sown. Why? Because part of the curses is that he would stop the rain. He would stop the former and latter rain. He'd stop. No. That's what it is. He'll stop the rain, and that we would have drought. Basically, because we see. No. Let's do this. Let's find that. Let's find that real quick. Deuteronomy 28, and I'll show an example of that. Let me start at 15. Let's see, 15. Jeremiah 14 and 2. Right. Let me see. Yeah, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 24. Before I read that, I'm going to read this again. It says, and that the whole land thereof is brimstone, and salt, and burning, and that is not sown. It can't be sown because there isn't rain. And there isn't rain because the Lord signified a drought to happen in our land when we transgress the laws. This is Deuteronomy 28, verse 24. It says, Yahweh shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. Powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. Why? Because he's making droughts happen in our land for us transgressing the laws. And that's detrimental to Israel because Israel is an agricultural people. They survive off tilling the land, their animals, and trading those things. So when we don't have rain, when the Lord makes a drought happen upon our land, our animals die, our plants die, and we can't survive because what are we going to eat? That's why it says, till thou be destroyed. And you see that happening. We see and this is honestly showing this right here. These two precepts together will show you how the curses happen multiple times. We see this happening in Jeremiah chapter 14. Jeremiah 14 and 1, it says, the word of the Lord, word of Yahweh that came to Jeremiah concerning the dearth. The dearth means drought. That's why it says drought and prayer and mercy. Matter of fact, let's look at this in another translation. Yeah, Jeremiah 14 and 1, it says, this message came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, explaining why he's holding back the rain, which is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 24. Judah wilts, commerce at the city grinds to and halt. Why? This is when it's talking about how the gates are thrown down when it says Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They're black unto the ground. Why? Because they're destroyed. Because our commerce, since we're an agricultural people, our commerce is going to come to a halt because we can't sell fruits and vegetables. We can't reap fruits and vegetables for ourselves. We can't trade animals or lambs, goats, cattle, all that. Why? Because he's stopped the rain, and they're all going to die because they can't eat the grasses on the ground to survive. That's why it says commerce in the city grinds to a halt, and all the people are in mourning. That's what it means by they're black unto the ground. That doesn't mean the Jew. You don't read Jeremiah 14:2. It says the Jews are black unto the ground. It means, oh, the Jews are black people. That's not what Jeremiah is saying. It wouldn't make any sense for him to say that, because if they were already black, they would already know that they're black. So why would he have to write it to them? That doesn't make sense. We have to deal with things in context. It says all the people sit on the ground in mourning, and a great cry rises from Jerusalem. Let's see. It says the nobles sent servants to get water, but all the wells are dry. The servants return with empty pitchers, confused and desperate, covering their heads in grief. The ground is parched. That parched ground. Let's see what parched ground looks like. This is what the land was looking like. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 24. This is what the ground was looking like. I think this might be actually being the land. Let's say parched ground, grace, and Torah. But this is what the ground was looking like. This is how the Lord was doing us for building up wickedness inside of this ephah. Building up our transgressions inside this ephah. This is part of that lead weight. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28. These are the curses, the captivity, the death, all these things. Because you can't survive like this. Try going days without food or water. Try doing that. You know what's going to happen when you do that? You're going to die. That's what's going to happen. And that's how the Lord was destroying us, for building up that weight, measuring that measurement up, which our forefathers did, like Christ said. Let's see. I'll read verse 5, and then we can go back into Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy. Let's see. Zechariah 5. Oh, no, I have it right there. Okay. Let's go. It says, Jeremiah 14, verse 5, is even the doe abandons her newborn fawn because there is no grass in the field. So it was so bad that the deers were abandoning their children to go find food for themselves. That's how bad it was in the land. That's how parched it was in the land. So let's go back into Deuteronomy chapter 29. So this explains what's happening right here in Deuteronomy 29, verse 23. It says, and that the whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that is not sown, nor beareth any grass groweth, nor any grass groweth therein, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboam, which Yahweh overthrew in his anger and in his wrath. Even all nations shall say, wherefore hath Yahweh done thus unto this land? So why did the Lord do this to this land? It's because they were building up iniquities in that effort. It says, what meaneth the heat of his great anger? Then men shall say, because they have provoked. I said provoked. I'm tripping. For they have forsaken the covenant of Yahweh, God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them forth out of the land of Egypt. And that's basically the same thing I've been saying this whole time. Through our transgressions, the Lord has allowed wickedness to fill up in that ephah until he had to just say, screw it, I'm about to put this lead weight on top of them, these curses which they cannot bear. It says, for they went and served other gods and worshipped them, gods whom they knew not, and whom he had not given unto them. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against this land to bring upon it all the curses that are written in this book, like I said in Baruch chapter 2. And the Lord rooted them out. The Lord rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land as it is this day. So we see these predatory animals. Like, let's just go back into Zechariah chapter 5, where it talks about that stork. A stork is known for snatching up children. Whose children are you snatching up? the children of Israel. And we're seeing that being fulfilled through the Edomites or the Europeans, who's being represented as eagles and as hawks, which we're going to get in Job later, as the predatory animals that's taking us into captivity and to removing us from our land, but because of our transgressions and our iniquities. So let's get Jeremiah chapter 24 now. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 24, verse 9. It says, I will deliver them to be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth for their hurt, to be a reproach and a proverb, a taunt and a curse in all places whither I shall drive them. And I will send the sword, the famine, and the pestilence among them, till they be consumed from off the land that I gave unto them and to their fathers. And you see this, all these things are named, the sword, the famine, and the pestilence are all things, and even the consummation is all things that you see in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Leviticus chapter 26. Now let's get Job. And this is going to be the crux of the issue with the two women. This is going to let you elaborate on who the two women are. Job chapter 39, verse 26. It says, okay. Job 39, verse 26 is, doth the hawk fly by thy wisdom and stretch her wings toward the south? Doth the eagle mount up at thy command and make her nest on high? She dwelleth, here's the point right here. She dwelleth and abideth on the rock, upon the crag of the rock, and the strong place. From thence she seeketh the prey, and her eyes behold afar off. So we see these two birds, right? We see in Zechariah chapter 5, it talks about the story of the predatory animal that comes to steal children. Anybody can Google that, it talks about that. So now, throughout these precepts, we've seen the Edomites or the Europeans being represented as the eagle. So now we see two birds. Now you see the hawk. The hawk, if you go into its scientific name, is the Aspio genitalius, which means Aspio, which means to seize, and genitalius means foreign or nation. So it's like a seizing Gentile. That's what the hawk is. A hawk flies and it's a seizing Gentile, a seizing nation. And what is a eagle? A eagle is a apex predator. You can Google that right now. Now, the difference between the eagle and the hawk is going to fly in and do what it does. They're just a seizing Gentile. They just do that. That's what the major players in the transatlantic slave trade did. The English, the French, and the Spanish. It's like Spanish, right? They represent the hawk. They're the ones that just came in and did the dirty work and bring us into captivity and partook in it. But the eagle, that apex predator, is one that sits afar off. Look at this, verse 29. From thence she seeketh the prey, and her eyes behold afar off. Because you see this. You see the so-called Jewish men, they completely financed the transatlantic slave trade. But what did they do? They stood afar off. They didn't take part in it. They didn't bring ships over here to go bring us into captivity, beat all this stuff out of us. They didn't have to do all that. They financed it though. They are this apex predator. They are this eagle. The rest of the lower level Edomites, like I named before, all the major players, like we got America, freaking the Britannia, which is the English, the Spanish, and the French. All of them are the hawk. They're that seasoned Gentile that did the dirty work. Those are the two women. Those are the two predatory animals, which represent that stork, which is that ultimate predatory animal of stealing children, which is known for stealing children. To let you know, this is talking about captivity. So these are these two women, right? Flip that over. So we're on page 2 of my notes. So going back into this, Zechariah 5 verse 9 again, it says, then lifted I up mine eyes and looked and beheld, there came out two women. These two women are the apex predator, the eagle, which is the Jewish man, the so-called Jewish man, and you have the hawk, which represents the rest of the European nations that took us into captivity, that you really see in Zechariah chapter 1, about the, what is that, the two, was it the horns of the carpenter? Let me look, actually, let me look. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm pretty sure it's the horns. I don't know how I forgot that. The four horns. Yeah. Zechariah 1 verse 18. Then lifted I up mine eyes and saw, behold, four horns. And I said unto the angel, which that talked with me, what be these? And he answered me, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Right? What is that? The British, France, Spanish, I believe that's America. Part of the horns that scattered, really going to bring us into captivity, just like we proved with all the rest of the precepts. Now going back into Zephaniah chapter 5, where was we at? Verse 9. It says, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. The ultimate predatory animal was known for stealing children, which is bringing us into captivity, the children being the children of Israel. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven, because the captivity that they put us through was so bad that everybody in the world knows it. It's never been, like, the stuff that's been happening to the Black, Spanish, and Native Americans through them scattering Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem, so bad that the whole damn world knows about it. That's why it's lifted up between earth and heaven, because you can see it. Everybody sees it and knows about it. So let's go to verse 11 and we can finish it off there. It says, and he said unto me, to build it an house. It says, and he said unto me, to build it an house and the land of Shinar, and it shall be established, right? It's going to be established and set there upon her base. So let's go back through this again. It says, he said unto me, to build it an house. This house is going into our temple, the temple that's going to be built. And this temple isn't a physical temple in this aspect. This temple is going to be the elect being lifted up, the elect being conformed to the image of the Son in the land of Shinar. Shinar is Babylon. And it shall be established, just like how we're going to be put together. We're going to be those lively stones that are built up, that lively house, that spiritual temple, and set up on our own base. And this own base is going into us being saved. And let's look at this in another translation, because it's going to go right what I said. The NLT says, he replied, to the land of Babylonia, which is going to Shinar, where they shall build a temple for the basket. The basket is a representation of the ephah. And when the temple is ready, they shall set the basket there on its pedestal. Now, this pedestal, this isn't going on to a low estate. This is going to the glorification. Just like how you have, I'll give it a perfect example. Like how you have the bust that they make for the people who go into the NFL Hall of Fame, right? You get the gold jacket. And that's, well, I mean, I'm not going to go into that. They get the gold jacket, and then they get a bust of them. It's like a statue that's set on a pedestal to be glorified. And look at all these accomplishments. Look at all they've done. That's going to be the same thing that's going to happen to the elect over here who are part of that temple. They're going to be set and glorified in Babylon the Great and delivered from this place and being known as those who are great in the kingdom. Because you see in Matthew chapter 5, Christ talks about those people who are going to be great, who keep the commandments of God and teach them. But the people who are going to be the least are going to be the Israelites who didn't keep them, who are going to be in the kingdom as well. But these are going to be the elect who are going to be set and put upon a pedestal, who are going to be brought up, and who you're going to know as those who escaped that fire that's going to be coming upon Babylon the Great. So let's get these precepts. Let's get Mark. Matter of fact, let's go back into that. Mark chapter 14, verse 58. It says, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. So Christ said, because this is basically them replying to Christ when Christ said he's going to destroy this temple. They're talking about the physical temple and then build it up in 3 days, talking about his death, and through his resurrection in the 3 days, he's going to build up a new temple. Him being that cornerstone, that was that cornerstone that we're all going to model ourselves after, to be those lively stones fitted to be framed into this temple. Watch. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 16. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 16. It says, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. So if we make up this temple, we are that one that got built up in those 3 days. We are that spiritual temple that got built up in those 3 days. We all represent those pieces of those stones, those hewn stones that were made ready. Because the thing is, there was no hammer, no sound of a hammer inside of the temple when it was being built. Matter of fact, let's get that. Let's get that. I think that's 1 Kings 6. Kings 6, built the temple. What is that? I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to start at verse 1 to get the context. This is 1 Kings 6 and 1. It said, and it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of Yahweh. This is talking about the physical temple. He began to build that physical temple. Now let's jump to verse 7. It says, and the house, when it was in building, was built of stone made ready before it was brought thither. So the stones that built up this temple were made already hewn correctly into the correct shape and size based off of the cornerstone. You had this original one, and then after they looked at that measurement, they built the rest of the stones. They hewn the hammer. Used the hammer and the axe and the tools to hewn these stones to make them ready before the temple was in building. And it's going to say it. It said, and the house, when it was in building, was built of stone made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was building. So right now, because we're not fully framed into this temple yet, because we're not saved and brought into our land, we are in this moment where we're hewing ourselves down through the prophets, through the scriptures, and through the apostles which the Lord has raised up to teach the people of Israel now, to hewn us into the stones that can be made ready to be brought into the temple, which is ultimately us being brought into our land, making up that spiritual temple of Yahweh, being conformed into that. Matter of fact, this right here, 8 verse 29. Romans 8 verse 29. So for whom he did foreknow, he did also predestinate to be conformed. Conform means to be changed. Just like how these stones are changed into messed up looking stones, and to correct stones to be built and be put into the temple. Be conformed to the image of the Son, which is what? The chief cornerstone. We look upon this stone and fashion the rest of the stones after this. Just like how Christ died, and just like how Christ died, he was resurrected and in glory to become that chief cornerstone. We follow after him, to be conformed after the image of him, his likeness. All right, because you look at this word image, I go into this all the time, icon, which means an image, figure, likeness. It says, which one? It says, use of the moral likeness of renewed men to God, which is Christ. We conform ourselves into the image of Christ. Him being that cornerstone of this temple through his acts, through his death, burial, and resurrection. We follow after him and be glorified just like him. We use our vessel, our vessel. We are those stones, right? We are those stones that get conformed and cut into the same image as the cornerstone to be built into this temple to follow after him. That's why we follow after his burial. Matter of fact, let me just get that. Romans 6. Yeah, Romans 6, verse 3. Right, and it's going to say what I was going to say. Romans 6 and 3, it says, "Know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into Yahushua Mashiach were baptized into his death," right? Because in somebody's death, in them 3 days, which he'll build again this new temple, right? Being that cornerstone, we're baptized into his death. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. Verse 5, for if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. So if he is the cornerstone, that chief cornerstone, right? We follow after his works. We model our let's just say our rock, because we're them stones, right? We model our stone after his stone. We are built up into this temple. Because even Peter talks about in First Peter 2 and 5, right? Because this is going to say exactly what I said summed up in these two verses. 1 Peter 2, verse 5, "Ye also, as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Mashiach Yahushua, through his death, burial, and resurrection." Like I said in Romans 6 or Romans 8. It says, "Wherefore also it is contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone." That chief cornerstone is Christ, which we modeled ourselves after. We're making ourselves right, so that when it's time for the temple to be assembled, we're already hewn in a way to where we can be used. That's the elect being brought up in that temple in Zechariah chapter 5. "To the elect precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded." So, going back into 1 Corinthians 3, verse 16, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth within you?" We are this temple that it's talking about. We're to build this house. Yahushua built this house. We found out we was Israelites in Babylon, in Shinar. We found out we're God's chosen people in the land, which we were told we were not God's chosen people. The elect is getting built here and established here to be set on that pedestal. As a matter of fact, let's go into some more precepts about that. Ephesians 2, verse 20. Ephesians 2, verse. Matter of fact, I'll start at verse 19 because this is going into what I was talking about anyway. Ephesians 2, verse 19. "Now therefore, ye are no more strangers." Matter of fact, what's the next one say? I'm gonna start at verse 16, read 19, and then go on. It says, Ephesians 2, verse 16, "And that he may reconcile both by God and one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby." Right? This is talking about Christ's death. He's made reconciliation with the Father, with Judah and Israel, so we can come back to the Father by being conformed to his image of his Son, so that we're not blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans anymore. We are actually the true children of God. Verse 19, it says, "Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints." Because that's who we are. Because before calling ourselves blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, that doesn't denote any type of nationality. That denotes of a Gentile, not being called God's chosen people. But through Christ, through the Holy Spirit that came upon us to start walking after these commandments and realizing who we are now the saints again, instead of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, right? Just like how you see the brothers out there on the streets. We're building up this house. That's why I would be remiss and I would be evil to speak against any of these people, to speak against any of these camps, really. Because, I mean, yeah, there are things that people do that aren't too savory, right? that certain people do that's not the best. And some people's doctrine is the best, right? But I would be remiss to say, oh, all these camps are evil and wicked, because the camps are the apostles and prophets that's building up this spiritual house. The same people who want to talk about camps are the same people talking against the people who are building up the foundation of the foundation of the house of God. Are you nuts? Like y'all want to make documentaries about how people are all camps are wicked. Y'all want to be on YouTube talking about camps are wicked, bro. Y'all are wicked. How dare you speak against that? How dare you speak against the people who are literally building up the house of God? And you know what it boils down to? A lot of them are wicked and love Babylon. That's why they do that. That's why I'm not about to fix my face to talk about these camps. Just like how you have like Bishop Nathaniel, people keep his name in their mouth perpetually on the internet. Bro, I have so much respect for this man, for all he does throughout, not even just work in America, but the work that he does outside of America, to where the scattered Israelites are. I respect that. Who am I to say anything about this man? He is being an apostle and prophet to these people. A lot of y'all not doing that. Where you and it don't even got. And I'm not trying to say, oh, everybody got to go out the country. It's not even that. A lot of y'all just sitting at the house, running your mouth. That Alzar, Deacon, Tahar, freaking who else? HOI, Sons of Thunder, all these rest of these camps that I don't even name, they're all building up the foundation of the house of God. So who are we to speak against? I just had to say that because I just don't like when people do that. And matter of fact, God doesn't like that. Ephesians 2 verse 20 again, it says, who are built up a foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yahushua Mashiach himself being the chief cornerstone, and whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in Yahweh, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. So the Lord is putting the Spirit upon the apostles and the prophets to build up and to wake up our people so we can build up these lively stones into this temple in Shinar, in Babylon, in America. That's what's going on right here. So the elect can be brought into their land and set upon a pedestal. Which looks like this. And this is going to be the last precept. Revelation 3 verse 12. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God. Going back to what we were saying before, overcoming is overcoming the world. Knocking off all those impurities off of you through the scriptures, through what the prophets say, through what the apostles say. Getting correct. Being able to be used by the Father in a correct way. That's what overcoming the world is. So it says, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem. That's us being brought and put on a pedestal. Because New Jerusalem is that city that's saved, which we're going to get, right? I'm going to have to get that precept now, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him my new name. So that's that pedestal that they're going to be set on. Them being able to have the name of God written upon them and to be saved and delivered and brought back into the land of Israel, which looks like this. Revelation 22. Oh, that's the wrong one. Revelation 21 and 1. It says, and I saw a new heaven, and it's going to rulership, and I saw a new heaven, a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea going into how the Edomites are ruling right now. They're going to be brought low. And says, and I, John, saw the holy city, which is the elect, which we just proved. This ain't about to be literally. People literally, and honestly, Christians and Christianized Hebrew Israelites think this is literally a city, literally like you got like DFW falling from the ground and land. That's not that. That's talking about the elect. We just proved it with the last verse. So I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride. There's the woman, a bride adorned for her husband. Let's see, is there any more on that tabernacle guy with it? Matter of fact, and I heard, verse 3, and I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. So that's us being put upon that pedestal. That's the elect of Israel being saved from Babylon. They get builded up in Babylon, get those elect, which are those lively stones that get hewn and made ready to be brought into the land of Israel, be made a pillar in the spiritual temple, and God dwells with them. That's being put on that pedestal. So when we go back to, so it looks like, okay. So where was that? Slack here. That was Officer Matati interrupting my lesson. Zechariah 5. So it says, and he said unto me, matter of fact, let's read this in the NLT again. That's a better rendition of it. And said, he replied to the land of Babylonia. And it says, where they built a temple for the basket. This is the spiritual temple, the elect being built up for the woman in the ephah, because it's the elect is Israel. Israel has always been the elect. And I keep saying this is the last precept, but I just keep getting more. Isaiah 40, or is it 42? Behold my servant. Is that? Yeah, Isaiah 44:1. It says, Yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen. Isaiah 42. Behold my servant, which is Jacob, whom I hold mine elect. The elect is out of that woman, which is Israel, which is Jacob, the Jacobites, the Israelites. So the elect will be built up out of that basket, which is the ephah, which is the representation of the woman with the wickedness in there. It says, and when the temple is ready, the temple being ready, meaning the Israelites being like the 144 being sealed, and the 1/3 that's going to follow after them being sealed and being ready, right? They will set the basket there on its pedestal. Israel will be set on its pedestal and glorified before the whole nations. Just like how in the NFL Hall of Fame, the people who make it to the NFL Hall of Fame get their bust, like a bust of their head, set upon a pedestal to be glorified through their accomplishments. And this also lets you know that all Israel is going to be saved. Because it said the basket, it doesn't just say the temple is going to be there. It says the basket's going to be there. That basket is a representation of the ephah where the woman is. That woman is Israel, letting you know that all Israel was going to be saved, just like how it says in Isaiah chapter 45. Isaiah 45:25, in Yahweh shall all the seed of Israel be justified and shall glory. And that glorification is being set on a pedestal. But yeah, man, matter of fact, before I go, let's just run through this real fast. Just to give a quick synopsis and then I'll be done. So starting back in Isaiah chapter 5, verse 5, it says, then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that go forth. And I said, what is it? And he said, this is an ephah, measuring receptacle, that go forth. He said, moreover, this is their resemblance throughout the whole earth. This is Israel's resemblance. Basically like what Israel is going to look like, being the woman inside this ephah with the wickedness in, with the curses on top, being that talent of lead. It says, and behold, there was there was lifted up a talent of lead, which is Deuteronomy 28, which is the curses, which is captivity and death. And this is a woman, Israel, that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. It says, and he said, this is wickedness. This wickedness is transgressing the law. And so he cast it in the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof. So they finally built it all the way up to the top. And what had to happen to the top? He had to put the lead on top, which is the Deuteronomy chapter 28, the curses. All this had to happen through the wickedness that we piled inside of that ephah. Verse 9, it says, then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and beheld, there came out two women, which really represents all of Idumea, but specifically the so-called Jewish man being the eagle, their apex predator, and the rest of the Europeans that took part in the transatlantic slave trade being the hawk. Those are the two women, the two Gentile nations. And the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. The stork is a predatory animal known for stealing children. And what does that let you know? Captivity, stealing the children of Israel. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven to let you know how bad our captivity was, because it's so bad and so gruesome that everybody in the world knows about it. Verse 10, then said I to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it in a house, that temple, that spiritual temple, the elect being built in Shinar. Where's Shinar? Babylon the Great, that great city where you see in Revelation. And it shall be established. Why? Because the elect are going to be conformed to the image of the Son. They're the lively stones that are correctly fitted to be made ready for the temple, for use in the temple. It says, and sat there upon her base, which basically is going into being glorified, to be brought into the land, being a pillar in the temple, all of these things, and us being established and being the apex of the earth. So this is really going from, Zechariah is really taking place from the time of Zechariah, really the time of us going into captivity, all of them captivity, all the way into us being saved from Babylon the Great and us being exalted. That's what Zechariah chapter 5 is going into, man. And I pray Israel was edified. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, IG, and TikTok. And with that, I want to say, call all Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai and Shalom.